ॐ आप्यायन्तु ममाङ्गानि वाक्प्राणश्चक्षुः श्रोत्रम् अतो बलम् इन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि सर्वं ब्रह्मोपनिषदम् माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्यां मा ब्रह्म निराकरोत् अनिराकरणमस्तु अनिराकरणं मे अस्तु तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्माः ते मयि सन्तु ते मयि सन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः अनन्तगुणपूर्णत्वाद् अगम्याय सुरैरपि सर्वेष्टदात्रे देवानां नमो नारायणाय ते. So, good evening, good afternoon, and good evening to friends who have joined for the part 4 of Kena Upanishad, also known as Talavakara Upanishad. So, let's get in directly. So, the Rishi for this is Chaturmukha Brahma, Sadashiva, Parvati, Talavakara Rishi, and all the Acharyas who have given us the Bhashyas and commentaries of this great Upanishad of the Samaveda. The Devata for this Upanishad is Vishnu, Namaka Paramatma, Rishikesha, Kapila, Aniruddha, Gayatri are all contemplations for the Devata of this Upanishad. Chandas, primarily Trishtup and Anushtup, and you also have other chandas as you navigate the Upanishad. So we have done the first mantra over 3 sessions. And we have done the half of the, I would say one and a half, no, I mean half of the second mantra as well. So what is the first mantra? Keneshitam patati preshitam manaha, kena pranaha pratamaha preiti yuktaha, keneshitam vacham imam vadanti, chakshuhu shrotram kavudevo yunati. So this is the very first mantra of this Upanishad. So the first mantra, as you know, is in Trishtup, but to be specific, it is in Burik Trishtup. So what is Burik Trishtup? If it has one extra syllable in a Trishtup Chandas, it's called Burik Trishtup. So it's got 44 plus 1, 45 syllables. So 11 times 4, 11 is what? Ekadasha Rudras. So here Rudra is asking that fundamental question. So that is the importance of the Chandas for this particular first mantra, Burik Trishtup. So what did Rudra ask? And we have done this over 2 sessions. Rudra asked a very important question. Yeah, how does this body work primarily? On our behalf, he has asked this very basic question as to how does this body work? So through that question, what we could do is we could think and discuss philosophy through physiology. So to understanding how the physiology of this body operates, we can actually understand how the philosophy of this operates. So physiology is what? How it works. Philosophy is what? Why it works the way it works. So the philosophy is asking the whys. Physiology is trying to answer how. Okay, so that's the difference, the why and the how. And you can have a synthesis of this and think about philosophy and actually go deep into it. To be honest, we don't have to go into temples to understand philosophy. You can actually sit in your own house and do a contemplation of your own physiology and understand the supersensory truth that exists out there. So that is the key message of the first mantra, that Rudra is asking this question. Kene shitam patati preshitam manaha, kena pranaha pratamaha preiti yuktaha, kene shitam vacham imam vadanti, chakshuhu shrotram kavudevo yunati. How does the mind operate? Why is this mind going astray? I am not able to control this mind. So what is going on? I am seeing all sorts of nasty things. I'm not able to control what I see. Why is it happening like this? I'm hearing all sorts of nonsense. Why is it happening? Even though I don't want to hear, I hear all this. And of course, the speech, we want to talk the right things, but sometimes all sorts of nasty things also come out of our vocal cords. And why does it happen so? Yeah. And what is this breathing that we are doing and that controls the whole body? What is all this? Is the basic question, isn't the philosophy of this? And we understood there are lots of subtle ideas here. The various sense organs that have been selected here by Rudra are important. Eyes, mind, speech, and ears. The sense organs themselves are interesting. Mind is an internal sense organ. Eyes and ears, they derive input from the external world. Speech is outwards going. You speak, it goes out from you. Vital breathing is in and out. So That sequence itself is interesting, and also it's the sense organs are all these sense organs are important for our philosophical, for our spiritual progress. So these sense organs have been selected by Rudra on our behalf. And of course, we have also looked at how when we are in utero as a fetus and once during delivery we come out, how does that sequence happens is also very interesting. So the mind, we think in utero, then what happens? We take our first breath, pratamaha praiti yuktaha. Then we do our first crying, which is the speech. Then we open our eyes and we look at our mom. And then we start hearing the external world. And then the whole world of samsara happens until we die. And then the cycle repeats itself. So that is also an interesting philosophy that we learned when we looked at the very first verse. But the question remains, who controls all this? Is what Rudra asking Chaturmukha Brahma in Vaijayanta mountain, when Chaturmukha is in deep contemplation on Narayana in the Vaijayanta peak of the Meru mountain, and Rudra approaches him and asks this question. And what did Chaturmukha Brahma, what was the answer that he gave? So this is the discussion for today, and hopefully we'll be able to look at it in great depth. Okay, because this is a very, 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 very subtle, very cryptic, very enigmatic verse that Chaturmukha is answering. What is he saying? Rudra, here is my answer. Shrotrasya shrotram, manasa mano, yad vachaha vacham, savu pranasya pranaha, chakshushash chakshuhu, atimuchya dhiraha, pretya asmal lokad amruta bhavati. So in the second half, he's saying, if you understood my answer very clearly and you put it into your practice during your life in this world, that is to you and me who are in samsara, if we understood the first two lines and the half of the second line, you stand to gain great benefit. What is that benefit? Atimuchya, pretya, asmat, lokat, amruta bhavati. So that is how important the answer that Chaturmukha gives to Shiva is, because that is our solution to actually get rid of the samsara of shrotrasya shrotram, manasa mano, yadvachaha vacham, savupranasya panaha, chakshushash chakshuhu. So last time we had a review of this. So the order. So again, look at the orders. The order that is appearing in this mantra is slightly different from the order in which the sense organs were listed in the first mantra. Okay, here, year of the year, Shrotra, Manas of the Manaso Mana, mind of the mind is second. Third is speech, Vachoha Vacham, speech. Then Pranasya Pranaha, vital force or the vital breath. Then finally chakshushash chakshuhu. So that is how it's set in this particular verse. Why? Because one very interesting way of looking at this is our spiritual progress. How does it happen? First we listen to a guru, shrotrasya srot. We first listen. Then we do manana. Okay, we do self, contemplation, rumination, revision, manana. Okay, that is the operation of your mind. Swapravachana is manana. Okay, then once you have some firmed up knowledge, then our Taittiriya Upanishad has very clearly said Swadhyaya Pravachanecha. These are the two fundamental things you have to do. So then you do Pravachana, that is Vacha. Then what you do keep these two things, listen to a guru, pravachana, swapravachana, parapravachana, then you get that such a firmed up knowledge, then you go into meditation. Yeah, atmavare shrotavyo mantavyo nitidhyasitavyaha, Maitreyi, we never forget that. So you go into meditation. What is the first prelude to meditation? Dharana. Dharana is what? Controlling your breath. Pranayama. Why do you control your breath? When you control your breath, you can control your mind. And when you control your mind, you can control your thought process. And when your thought is eventually controlled and your mind is blanked, then you can have the opportunity of going into asamprajnata samadhi. So dharana is the first step towards that. Okay. And when you go into asamprajnata samadhi, what happens? Chakshushash chakshuhu. You see what? God vision. So in placing this order, our Chaturmukha has actually summarized the whole journey of souls or the whole steps towards philosophical progress. Shravana, Manana, Dhyana, and then Sakshatkara. Okay, so that is the steps for philosophical progress. There is no shortcut here. Some people may want us to believe that there is a shortcut, but actually there is no shortcut according to the Vedas. This process may take us one lifetime, it could take millions of lifetimes before we evolve into that level of perfection. But that is the order that this particular mantra so beautifully tells us. Okay. Then, of course, we discussed last week that, say, Raghavendra Tirtha gives a further explanation of this as to how this operates. What does Shrotrasya Shrotam actually means? Year of the year. What does year of the year mean? Okay. So, one way of looking at this is Shravana Shakti Pradaha Shrotrasya Shrotram, the giver of the power of hearing to the ears and to the Abhimani Devata Chandra. Who is it that is giving the power to the sense organ called the hearing? Okay, even a dead body has that, but when the body is living, we hear it because we still have the ear. But when the body is dead, we don't hear it. It doesn't make sense. So, who is the giver of the power of hearing to the ears and to the Abhimani Devata Chandra? Shravana Shakti Pradaha. Manaso Mano. Mana Mana Shakti Pradaha. Manana Shakti Pradaha. The giver of the power of thinking to the mind. Many of us here in this group may be psychiatrists, psychologists, and so on. We think, thoughts come in, we think, and so on. It happens without our control. But the question is, why does it happen? Who makes this? Who prompts these thoughts to come? Who prompts this for us to experience certain things and so on? Who gives that power? So the giver of the power of thinking to the mind and the giver of the power to Rudra, who is he? That person is the Manasa Mano. Vak Ucharana Shakti Pradaha, the giver of the power of talk to speech, and the giver of power to Agni, who is the Abhimani Devata of the speech. So that is how we remember we did Adi Bhuta, Adi Deva, Adi Atma, and Adi Yajna way of looking at all these mantras. And this is what the second mantra actually illustrates, that you have to look at it at various levels. Pranasya Mukhya Vayoho Pranaha Praneta, the promoter of even the Mukhya Prana. Who is he? Who is the promoter of Mukhya Prana? He is Pranasya Pranaha. We'll come back to it in a little bit. Last week you looked at this Mukhya Prana and so on. What is this concept of Mukhya Prana? We revised that it comes everywhere in the Upanishad. There is no running away from it. Okay, some folks may want to conveniently run away from even thinking about prana and mukhya prana, but it is again their problem because Upanishads are very clear. All the rishis who have seen the Vedas have talked about prana. Okay, it's only some folks who conveniently decide not to think about prana, which is their problem. Okay? So that is pranasya mukhya vayoho pranaha praneta, the promoter of even prana or vayu. Who is that entity is the question. Then Chakshushas Chakshuhu, Darshana Shakti Pradaha, who gives the power of vision? Okay, have we ever thought about this? We just see the external world, but how is it happening? Why is it that there is this external world? Why is they're emanating photons? Why do they hit on our retina? And why do each wavelength produce a particular neural signal? Why do our optical cortex makes some kind of analysis of the data? And why do we experience something? Okay, why is it like this? Okay, that is the question that Chaturmukha wants us to ask. The giver of the power of vision to eyes, or the giver of the power of the vision to Surya. Okay, who is this? If you start thinking that, then that will give you the answer for your salvation. You can actually jump and escape the samsara if you actually ask this. Because when we have the sadhana sharira, this is what we do. We see things, we hear things, we speak things, we experience things. Yeah. And if you ask who is doing it, then that is a solution for your emancipation, is what Chaturmukha is saying. So let us look at this in greater depths. Let's dive deep into this verse, because this first half of this verse deserves a lot of contemplation and self rumination for a long time to get to what is it that Chaturmukha is kind of teaching us through Rudra. So let's look at, Shrotrasya Shrodam, that which hears, that through which we hear. Okay, so that which hears could be the ear that hears, that gathers the sound waves. But actually, the ears don't hear. We hear through the ears. That is the fact. Yeah, we hear. The ear doesn't hear. We hear. Yeah, that which, through which we hear is Shrotram. That which hears is Shrotram. Soul hears, the soul experiences that hearing. Okay, ultimately it is the sentient thing that will experience. A jada cannot experience. We have discussed this a million times. A jada cannot experience. A stone doesn't experience. If you look at the optical cortex and the ear, they are all made of matter, so they are jadas. They cannot experience hearing. They can convey some impulses, but there must be somebody else who is experiencing that hearing. So that could be the soul, okay, Shotram. But the soul is dependent, we think, because we can't control what we hear. So ultimately, it is the God or Paramatma or our Antaryamin who is the independent hearer of everything. Okay, He is all pervasive, He is all powerful, He is all independent, and He is the one who ultimately hears everything. And if He doesn't hear, we don't hear. That is the idea there. We'll go into the next level of how to understand that, but just stay with me on this. God is the independent hearer of everything. Okay, there are some people who actually say God is completely useless being who cannot experience his own existence. So that is one extreme view, but that is not the view of Chaturmukha. Yeah. A Nirguna Brahman, for example, cannot hear anything. Okay, he does not have that attribute of hearing. Yeah. But that is not what our Chaturmukha is saying. He says God is the independent hearer of everything. That is why he is called Shrotrasya Shrotram. Similarly, Manasa Mano, that which thinks, that through which we think, our think is limited and dependent. God is the independent thinker of everything. He simultaneously he knows eternally the past, present, and the future. He knows. He is always his tapas, tapa alochane, as we have done is. His tapas is full of knowledge and covers past, present, and future. So his tapas is all over the place, everywhere. So God is the independent thinker of everything. So he is called as Manasa Mano. Vachoha Vacham, that which speaks, that through which we speak. Okay, the vocal cords themselves don't speak. We speak through our vocal cords, but our speaking is limited and dependent. God is the independent controller of speech, and he is constantly reciting the whole Vedas simultaneously all the time. Yeah, Chakshushas Chakshuhu, sight, that which sees, that through which we see. Our seeing, of course, is limited and dependent because the wavelengths that we see is very limited, right? Ultraviolet, infrared spectrums, we can't see. We see only a limited spectrum of the external world. Okay, whereas Paramatma is an independent seer of everything simultaneously of the past, present, and the future. Yeah, Chakshusha Chakshuhu. So that is the idea that Chaturmukha Brahma is talking about, that somebody who is independent, who sees everything, who thinks everything, who hears everything, and so on. Prana, that which breathes, that through which we breathe. Mukhya Prana may make us all breathe, but he is also dependent. And we are going to deal with this in the subsequent slides today. God is the independent controller of even the Mukhya Prana, so he is called Pranasya Pranaha. So this Manasa Mano, Vachoha Vacham, Chakshushas Chakshuhu, Pranasya Pranaha, Shrotrasya Sotram should remind you of there must be something that is underlying these physiological processes that is ongoing. That cannot be the material thing. It cannot be the soul. It cannot be the Abhimani Devatas. It has to be something that is independent, something that is really different from all the things that we have spoken about, is what Chaturmukha Brahma is talking about. Okay, so before we go to the next slide, there is this doctrine, isn't it, of relationship between of Jiva and Brahman that is being discussed here. So that is what Chaturmukha Brahma wants us to think about, is that relationship, the doctrine of relationship between Jiva and Brahman. So I just want to open it up for a couple of a minute or so for folks to contribute. What is that relationship between Jiva and Paramatma? That is a regular, that is a key concept in Vedantic philosophy that Chaturmukha is reminding us here. So who wants to contribute there?
Madhuji, is it that the jiva has dependent self-initiated action, whereas Brahman is the only entity that has independent and self-initiated action?
Thank you, Sureshji. What is the term for that? Anand.
Bimba Pratibimba doctrine.
Beautiful. Thank you very much to Anandji and Sureshji, because you got this absolutely right. It's a doctrine of dependence and independence. Okay. So this Bimba Pratibimba Bhava is what that this particular verse is actually getting at. And let's spend some time thinking about various ideas from various Upanishads. So these are all the concept of Bimba Pratibimba Bhava is not plucked from thin air. This is a philosophy of the Upanishads. This is a philosophy of the Vedas that our Srimad Acharya has brought forth very, very clearly and has given us clarity with regards to how this needs to be looked at. The doctrine of dependence of Jiva and the independence of Paramatma, as Sureshji so beautifully spoke about just a minute ago. The Bimba Pratibimba Bhava, that is the technical definition that Anandji gave out. So if you look at Prashna Upanishad, hopefully at some point we will be able to do Prashna Upanishad. There is a very, very beautiful verse. I'll come to that in a minute. But before we come to that, this idea of Bimba Pratibimba Bhava. Okay, this Bimba Pratibimba Bhava is what? Object and reflection. Okay? Bimba is the object. Pratibimba is the reflection. So Bimba is the Antaryaman or the Paramatma, and the reflection is the Pratibimba, which is the soul or the Jiva. So that is how the philosophy is. So this should not be taken literally. So that is very, very important. Some people do, but you should not. You should not take a literal view like, okay, I'm adjusting my tie in front of a mirror. So I am there. This mirror, this reflection is the jiva, but the reflection is actually it's just a reflection. It's a jada, right? In this example, so you can't take the example to its extreme length. You have to understand what is it that philosophy. The philosophy there is the reflection is dependent on the object. Only the object moves and tries to adjust its tie, the reflection also appears to move and adjust its ties. That is what is the idea there of dependence. Whatever the object does, the reflection does. And there is an element of resemblance between the object and the reflection, and whatever the object does, the reflection does. So the reflection is dependent on the object for its things. Yeah, that is all to it. That is the Bimba Pratibimba Bhava. Okay, which is of course described very beautifully in Rig Veda, which we have done it. Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Babuvaha Tadasya Rupam Pratichakshanaaya Indro Mayabihi Purarupa Iyate Yuktahi Yasya Harayah Shatadasha. So this is the key verse of the Rig Veda that talks about the Bimba Pratibimba Bhava. So basically what this verse is for every soul there is an Antaryamin, and the Antaryamin is there in every soul, and this soul should see the Antaryamin, and the way the soul sees its Antaryamin is different for each soul. This Antaryamin is the same, but the soul sees this, each soul based on its capacity sees its Antaryamin. Rupam Rupam Prati. Yeah, for each Jiva there is a Bimba Rupa. Okay, the same idea described in Katha Upanishad. And I'll just say the first verse because it's very similar. Agni Rata Eko Bhuvanam Pravishto Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Babovah Ekastata Sarvabhutantaratma Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Bahushta. So similarly, Yama talks to Nachiketa and talks about Agni, Vayu, Surya, Agni, Vak, Vayu, Prana, Surya, Chakshus. These are all the same ideas. The Samanvaya of the Shastra is 100% if you look at it from that drishti. Yeah, Shastra Drishtya, that is what the Brahma Sutra says. Shastra Drishtya tu Padesho Vamadevavat. Shastra Drishti, Antaryami Drishti. Okay, so if you look at it through Samanmaya, it is exactly the same what Katha Upanishad is saying and Rig Veda is saying about this Bimba Pratibimba Bhava of object and reflection. Okay, I want to introduce another interesting idea, beautiful idea in Prashna Upanishad. Okay, which also talks about this Bimba Pratibimba Bhava of dependence and independence with another excellent analogy that again we do it all the time. So, and every time when the sun is out and you're going for a walk and you see a shadow of yourself, think about this philosophy of Prashna Upanishad. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful example. Atahi enam kaushalyascha ashwalayanaha papracha. This is the third question. So, as you know, 6 rishis, they go to Pippala, the rishi, right? So the third guy asked this question. What's his name? Kaushalya. Kaushalyascha ashwalayana, son of Ashwalayana, papracha. What did he ask? Bhagavan, kuta esho prano jayate? Katam ayatyasmin sharire atmanam va pravibhajya katam pratishtite केन उत्क्रमते कथम बाह्यम अभिदत्ते कथम अध्यात्ममिति केन कथम he is asking who is this prana, what is this origin of this prana, and how did he come about, and so on and so forth. Why does he do all these activities? Remember this savu pranasya pranaha, this pranasya pranaha, and this prana is there, right? Our Kaushalya Rishi is asking this question, how does this prana come about? Why does he do these activities? Again, see, Prashna Upanishad talks only about prana tattva. So, when he asked that question, our Pippalada was very, very happy. Tasmai sahovacha ati prashnan pruchasi. Okay, so the Guru is super impressed and he is very happy that Kaushalyashta Ashwalayanaha asked this question. He said, Ati Prashnan, beautiful question. You asked a very beautiful question, Ashwalayana. Ati Prashnan, Pruchasi. This question, the fact that you asked this question means Brahmanishto. You are a Brahmanishta, Brahmishta. Brahmishto asiti. The very fact that you are even thinking about asking this question to me reminds me and confirms that you are a Brahmishta. Who is a Brahmishta? Brahma means Veda. Ishta means somebody who is engrossed in the Vedas. Okay, you are a very knowledgeable person. You are actually always thinking about the knowledge that is there in the Brahma, in the Veda. Brahmishta asiti. That is why therefore, tasmat te aham bravimi. Okay, he'll say, I will tell you about this, who this prana is and how did he come. If we understand this, then we understand the Keno Upanishad's answers, savu pranasya pranaha. What did Pippalada answer him? Atmana esho prano jayate. Okay. So Atmana there means Antaratmana or Brahman or Vishnu. Prana. Atmana esha prano jayate. The origin of this prana comes from Brahman. So we know from Purusha Sukta, right? That the prana comes from, that the Vayu comes from the breath of Brahman, right? So anybody wants to remind us that verse in Purusha Sukta before we make the next step? Who wants to tell us that particular verse of Purusha Sukta that says this? No worries, think about this. So Purusha Sukta says that from the breath of Brahman, Mukhya Prana comes out. Okay. So that is exactly what Pippalada says. Atmana esho prano jayate. And then he puts a very, very beautiful, beautiful explanation as to what is that relationship between prana and Brahman. Ata esha purushe chaya ya tasmin netad atatam. Okay, this is very important. What is that relationship with prana and Brahman? Ata esha purushe chaya etasmin etad atatam. Okay, so this prana's relationship with Brahman is like what? Is like yat yesha purushe. Purushe means our Brahman. Chaya means shadow. Chaya, tapo, you remember the Gita, right? Chaya means shadow. Chaya tasmin etad atatam. Atatam means fully dependent. chaya, shadow. So he says, look, this prana comes from Brahman, and this prana's relationship with this Brahman is like a shadow's relationship with the person. Okay, so when we walk outside and there is a shadow, the shadow is always coming with us. Whatever the object does, the shadow also does. If the object moves, the shadow moves. Okay, so that is another example that our Pippalada gives to bring home this idea of Bimba Pratibimba Bhava. So there is one in Rig Veda and Katha Upanishad about object and reflection. And there is another metaphor in Prashna Upanishad that talks about object and its shadow. Okay, again, not to be taken too literally, but that understanding that the shadow is dependent on the object. When the object moves, the shadow moves. The shadow is the jiva. And in this example, Prashna Upanishad, what Pippalada is talking about is that Jivottama, the first among the souls who comes from Atmana Esho Prano Jayate, Ata Esha Purushe Chaya Tasmin Etad Atatam. How this shadow is dependent on this, like that the Jivottama, Prana, Mukyavayu's relationship with the Purusha is like a shadow and an object. I.e., saying that even this Prana Tattva who emanates from Brahman is entirely dependent on Brahman. And then of course the Prashna Upanishad keeps talking about this even in detail. Okay, so I hope you're able to appreciate two different examples of dependence and independence and Bimba and Pratibimba Bhava that is there in our Upanishads, and they are all there for it to see. It is not a made up philosophy. It is from the Upanishads that the Acharya extracts this Bimba Pratibimba Bhava relationship between the soul and the super soul. Even Madhu Brahmanam of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad basically puts the very same verse. Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Babuva Tadasya Rupam Pratichakshanaya Indro Mayabhihi Purarupa Iyate Yuktahi Asya Harayaha Shatadasha. Okay. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Katha Upanishad, Rig Veda, Prashna Upanishad, they all talk about this. Okay, and then of course when we talk about this dependence independence, we have to do a prasthana trayi understanding. Okay, so we have done the Upanishads. What about the sutra? So Badarayana, Krishna himself, Krishna Dvaipayana puts a number of sutras in Brahma Sutra that talks about it. Ata evacha upama surya kadivat. Just like how there is the sun and you see the reflection on the river, this is how the relationship is. Okay, reflection and the object. Abhasa evacha. Abhasa means reflection. Amshaha. Nana vyapadesha danyata chapi dasha. Look at that sutra as well, Brahma Sutra. So there are three sutras that talk about Bimba Pratibimba Bhava, and then there is the Prashna Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Katha Upanishad, and Rig Veda. So that gives you the whole review of this idea, which comes from the second verse. That is what Chaturmukha is saying. If you need to understand this, unless we understand this dependence, independence, there is no solution to your problem. So let us dwell a few more minutes on this Bimba Pratibimba Bhava, because that is, as I said, is a very key philosophy. So our Mukhya Prana, so here is, I'll come to that in the next line, because our Chaturmukha has put Savu Pranasya Pranaha. He didn't put Savu Shotrasya Shrotram or Savu Manaso Mano or Savu Vachaha Vacham. He put Savu Pranasya Pranaha. That itself is important. Why? Because Mukhya Prana, one reason, of course, there are other reasons, we'll come to it in a minute. One of the reasons there is Mukhya Prana is the Sakshat Pratibimba of Antaryaman. He is the first Pratibimba of Antaryaman because he is Jivottama. And that reflection, the dependence is goes on and on and on. Okay, so you have Prana Chaturmukha Brahma, and then you have Saraswati Bharati, then you have Rudra Garuda Sesha Rudra, then you have the consorts of Garuda Sesha Rudra, then you have Shan Mahishis, then you have Parvati Parvati Varuni and Suparni, then you have Indra, then you have other dependences finally coming to you and me. So we are dependent on so many other sentient beings, and finally the Jivottama is Mukhya Prana, who is called Sakshat Pratibimba, and then the Antaryamin. So this Bimba Pratibimba Bhava philosophy is actually quite deep. Yeah, so you got to go deeper and deeper and say Sakshat Pratibimba is Mukhya Prana. His Pratibimba is Saraswati Bharati, the Saraswati Bharati's Pratibimba is this, and so on. So the dependence goes on. Okay? Ultimately, of course, we are all dependent on the Antaryami. Now, if you look at Gita, so Prasthana Trayi, let's do the verse in Gita which so beautifully talks about the Bimba Pratibimba Bhava. So, who wants to take up 2:18? Note the number 18 gives you a very, very important philosophy of Gita. So, who wants to recite this verse and potentially tell us this meaning also? Anandji, go for it.
अन्तवन्त इमे देहाः नित्यस्योक्ता शरीरिणः अनाशिनो अप्रमेयस्य तस्मात् युध्यस्व भारत. Antavanta ime deha. This body is perishable. Shariranaha is the soul there. Nityasokta, which is eternal. Anashino is imperishable. Apremeyasa is incomprehensible, that is Bhagavan. Tasmat Yudyas, for these reasons, get up and fight.
Thank you, Anandji. Yes, very nicely put. So this particular verse also talks about that Bimba Pratibimba Bhava relationship between the soul and the Paramatma. Okay. So when are the situations? What are the situations where the Pratibimba does not exist? The reflection does not exist. There are only three reasons why a reflection cannot exist. A reflection cannot exist if the object does not exist. Okay. Or if the reflecting medium is not present. Reflecting medium is called Upadhi. Okay. Or if the object is not in contact with the reflecting medium, that is called Sannidhana. So those are the three situations where the Pratibimba cannot be there. If you say Pratibimba is Jiva and then the Bimba is the object, object is everywhere. This Paramatma is all pervasive being. Okay. The number 2 and 3, the reflecting medium and the contact. Okay. That is where the interesting philosophy Anashinaha Aprameyasya. So our acharyas give a lot of discussion on this Anashinaha Aprameyasya. That is why the soul is Nitya. Why is the soul Nitya? Is eternal and indestructible? Because Anashinaha Aprameyasya. God, the object or the Bimba is eternal. Jiva, the image, Pratibimba is also eternal. The reflecting medium is the soul itself. Swarupa Deha itself is Upadi. Therefore, it is also eternal. God is omnipresent. So, the Sannidhana is everywhere. So, in that particular equation, this Bimba Pratibimba Bhava is an eternal relationship between the soul and the super soul. Between this Jiva and the Antaryaman, it is the eternal relationship. And there is this independent being that is controlling everything. So that is what this verse is getting at. We had to do all this Bimba Pratibimba review to understand what is the deeper philosophy when Chaturmukha says Shrotrasya Shrotram Manasa Mano Yadvachaha Vacham Savu Pranasya Pranaha Chakshushas Chakshuhu. Look at our Dhruva. Okay. So this particular verse we cannot close this verse without looking at the Dhruva situation. So anybody wants to remind us what happened to Dhruva, and then he goes into deep meditation, right? So and anybody wants to share those ideas? Dhruva's background?
Can I?
Okay, go for it, Daya.
Yes, sir. Dhruva was he was not welcomed by his stepmother Shruti. So when he sat on his father's lap, his father had two wives. He sat on his father's lap, like his brother Uddhava, who was Suruchi's, I'm sorry, Suruchi's son. So when he also wanted to sit on his father's lap, Suruchi scolded him, "You cannot sit like this and all," and he got offended. And he went and asked his father, is there some position which is even higher than his father, which cannot be reached by any of them? Something which is higher than his father. His mother told him about Lord Narayana, and first he survived only on food for 15 days or something like that. Then he survived only on liquids. Then gradually at the end of 6 months, he survived only on air. So then Paramatma came before him uh, uh, and automatically when he blessed him, he automatically started singing praises on the Lord. And later, he was also the concept of Dhruva Smriti was also born. So this is my small knowledge about it.
Yeah, thank you, Daya. So, yeah, very, very nicely summarized. So when Narayana came in front of him and said, "What do you want? What is your broom?" He said, "Oh, I don't. You'd make everything happen. So you just ensure that I'm devoted to you." So what did he say? And when we did our, Mundaka Upanishad, this is the mantra that we were always reciting, isn't it? Yo antaha pravishya mama vacha imam prashuptam sanjivayati akila shakti daraswadamna अन्यांश्च हस्तचरण श्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यम् in Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, 9-6. Okay, the English transliteration I've taken from Sri Keshav Rao Tadpatri's article, and I'm grateful for that beautiful piece that Keshav Rao Tadpatri ji has written. So, what is the transliteration that he has given for this? O Lord, I bow to you, the indweller of all beings. You stimulate the slumberous sense of speech in me with your self effulgence, being the source of all strength, not only to the sense organs, but to all the Tattva Abhimani Devatas. You also stimulate or invigorate all other faculties, namely the action organs like hands, feet, etc., the sense organs like auditory organs, skin, etc., and the mind, the vital faculties, as per your will, and also retracts those capabilities as per your will. I bow to you, such great Lord. So that beautiful transliteration of this verse from Dhruvas, when Antaryami Narayana, actually he has an aparoksha jnana, the Narayana is in front of him. Our Dhruva doesn't know what to speak, and he is completely in a state when he has aparoksha jnana of Narayana, and he says this mantra, which is so beautiful, and which is what the second verse of our Kena Upanishad is, because he is the person who controls our mind, our speech, our prana, our walk, and everything that Dhruva has told us. Okay, so never forget that Dhruva Stuti and this Dhruva's prayer to Antaryami Narayana. And this is exactly what Krishna has also told us, isn't it? There are so many beautiful verses in chapter 15, and we could certainly get one of our folks to recite this. So 15:6, 15:12, and 15:9, who wants to take this up and recite this? Because that is also the same ideas about this controllership of material things, the Tattvabhimani Devatas, the souls, and so on, that Krishna talks about in the most important chapter of Gita, which is chapter 15, Purana Purushottama Yoga. So who wants to recite please? 15:6, 12, and 9.
न तद्भासयते सूर्यो न शशाङ्को न पावकः यद्गत्वा न निवर्तन्ते तद्धामा परमं मम यदादित्यगतं तेजो जगद्भासयतेऽखिलं यच्चन्द्रमसि यच्चाग्नौ तत्तेजो विद्धि मामकम् श्रोत्रं चक्षुस्पर्शनं च रसनं घ्राणमेव च अधिष्ठाय मनश्चायं विषयानुपसेवते.
Thank you very much, Pratibhaji. Beautifully recited. So when you look at these verses from the perspective of what Kena Upanishad is saying, then it all makes sense. When Krishna is saying Surya, Shashanka means moon, Pavaka means fire, he is not talking about Surya, Shashanka, and Pavaka as material things. He is talking about the Surya Devata, he is talking about the Chandra Devata, he is talking about Agni Devata. Okay, so that is how we have to read the Gita. Yeah, not, I mean, that is, so you have to read it as Krishna himself has said, right? Adi Bhuta, Adi Deva, Adi Atma, Adi Yajna. Yeah, so when Adi Yajna comes, what has happened? Shrotram Chakshus Parshanam Cha Rasanam Granam Evacha Adhishtaya Manascha Ayam. I am inside all these fellows. Okay, and then ensuring that they do their job, and in that process I actually accept those. Okay, Shrotrasya Shrotram, Manasa Mano, Tadvachaha Vacham, everything is here. Shrotram, Chakshu, Granam, Manascha. The four that our Kena Upanishad is talking is actually there in Gita 15:9. And again, of course, as we all, then Gita is the summary of the Upanishad. So every time you study the Gita, we have to study the Upanishads. Look at Katha Upanishad, very similar verse. Na tatra suryo bhati, na chandra tarakam, namo vidyuto bhanti, kuto ayam agnihi. Tameva bhantam anubhati sarvam, tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. So that is what is the philosophy of Shrotrasya Shrotram Manasa Mano, etc. of this verse is exactly what Katha Upanishad is talking, is exactly what our chapter 15 is talking. And of course, we know that Dhruva actually brought it into practical fruition. And he sort of experiences that and he says that you are the person who's doing it. So why is this all important for our upasana and chintana? Okay, so we need to be thinking about this problem. If we don't, we will never find a solution because we think we speak, we hear, we do this, we do that. But that is not what is actually going on, reminds our Prasthanatrayi again and again. The all knowing, the all doing, and the all controlling supremacy of the Lord is what is being described here. And of course, our Brahma Sutra said, Janmadhyasya yataha. He who is the creator, etc. What are those etc.? Taittiriya Upanishad, Yato va imani bhutani jayante, yena jatani jivanti, yat prayanti, abhisam vishanti, tad vijijnasasva tad brahmeti. स्कंद पुराण उत्पत्ति स्थिति संहार नियतिर्ज्ञानम आवृत्ति बंध मोक्षा च पुरुषाद यस्मात् हरिरेकराट. He is the guy who does the eightfold cosmic dispensation and he knows everything. And what did Acharya say in Anubhashya, which is a beautiful verse of Anubhashya of Srimad Acharya? विष्णुरेव विजिज्ञास्यः सर्वकर्ता आगमोदितः समन्वया दीक्षतेश्च पूर्णानंदोन्तरखवत्. So read up the Anubhashya, pick up this verse, Sarvakarta. He is the doer of everything. Okay? If we don't understand this, Paramatma is the Sarvakarta, we don't stand any chance. We are just a puppet. Yeah, Nimitta Matram, as was told in Gita, we are just a Nimitta. He is the Sarvakarta, he is the ultimate doer. Very beautifully captured by Srimad Acharya with that particular word, Sarvakarta. Yeah. Okay. Sarvakarta and the Sarvakartrutva can be known through agamas. Agama uditaha. Okay. So go back and check those words. So I hope you find this whole idea of Bimba Pratibimba Bhava actually quite profound. Okay. So here is another thought. Yeah. If God is the complete controller and regulator of all, okay, here is, and I think we need to bring these ideas whenever we get an opportunity, and it gives an opportunity for revision. Why does he not make everyone do good things? Why are we all not like Dhruva? Why are we not like all the great exalted souls? We do all sorts of nasty things. If God is the complete controller and regulator of all, why does he not make everyone do the good things only? Okay. What is the philosophical argument or what is the answer to this question? Again, that will give us an idea as to why there is all these things that happens in the world. Anybody wants to contribute there? If he's controlling all jivas, if he is a benevolent Lord, why is he not making all jivas do only good things, see good things, hear good things, speak the good things, and think only good things? But none of us do that. Sureshji.
It's not that God cannot do it, but he chooses not to do it because of the constitution that he's put into place, which is to ensure that all actions are the jivas are I mean, they have ever existed. So it is not to create or induce something which did not exist earlier. It is to make sure that only those actions take place which are uh, the result of the swabhava of the individual jivas.
Beautiful, Sureshji. Perfect answer. This is where we should always think about the Jiva Kartrutva Vada. Why God chooses not to, although He is the ultimate regulator and controller of everything, does He, if He is omnipotent, then He should be able to do, but why does He not do it? Jiva Kartrutva, go to Brahma Sutra, Adrishta Niyamat. So everything that we do, there are three levels, right? Purushakya Prayatna, Anadi Karma, Jiva Swabhava. As Suresh ji so beautifully said, it is the rule of the Lord, made by the Lord only, brought into practice by the Lord, followed meticulously by the Lord, that only He should bestow results as per these criteria. Jiva Swabhava, Anadi Karma, Purushakya Prayatna. There are some jiva swabhavas which have an intrinsic nature of only doing the good things. And then there are the Duryodanas of this world who can only do the nasty things. That is their swabhava. All that God does is He just gives them the facilities to act out their swabhavas. But He is the ultimate regulator and a controller. And He is very impartial because He provides only the environment, and then he keeps quiet and let them play out their their own destination. So we should never forget this, why he doesn't do Anand.
I mean, that's a good explanation, but how do we explain the sufferings by the innocent people?
So the yeah, sure, Anandji. Anybody wants to take up Anandji's question? Anybody wants to answer why innocent people suffer?
No, just like what you put anadi karma. The karma is the previous karma is the one which determines the today's suffering. So if you did something bad in this previous or who knows when with Janma, God knows that he has to undergo the consequences.
Thank you very much, Prakash ji. Fantastic answer. Yeah. So let's move on. So here I just want to, we got about 10 to 15 minutes. There's so much philosophy to think here. It's just an incredible verse. Shrotrasya shrotram manasa mano yad vachaha vacham chakshushas chakshuhu savu pranasya prana. So as I reminded you a few minutes ago, Chaturmukha said savu pranasya pranaha. Okay. Prana, Mukhya Prana, Chaturmukha, they are all the same category of souls. They all belong to the Ruju category of souls. The current Chaturmukha was a Mukhya Prana in the previous creation. The current Mukhya Prana will become Chaturmukha Brahma in the next creation. So that is how the sequence is. So in that sense, Chaturmukha says, Savu Pranasya Prana, you are inside me. I am the highest among souls, and he controls me also is one of the indications there. And also because Mukhya Prana is the highest among the souls, he wants to remind Rudra, look, even and the highest among the souls, he is the inner controller. Okay. But there are also other ideas that we can actually bring up for our contemplation. Why Savu Pranasya Pranaha? Look at God. So this Prana, although he is the highest among the souls and inside him is this Antaryamin, he is also the purest among the souls. That is the key point there. He is the purest among the souls, and this Hamsadavaka Paramatma is inside him, as we know in Hamsa Gayatri. Hamsaha Shuchi Sat. Shuchi means the pure. The pure is the Mukhya Prana. Hamsaha, Hamsanamaka Paramatma is in him. So there is a view that the very first Pratika that needs to be worshipped is Mukhya Prana, because it is inside him that Hamsanamaka Paramatma is there, is the message from the Hamsa Gayatri of Katha Upanishad. So that is one reason, another reason why he says Pranasya Pranaha, because he is the Shuchi, he is the highest among the Jivas, and this Paramatma is inside him. And we have also done Isha Upanishad, isn't it, before 17th verse. Vayur anilam amrutam ata idang basmantam shariram. Om kratosmara krutam smara kratosmara krutam smara. Vayuhu is anila. This Vayu or Mukhya Prana is Anila. Anila means what? A plus Nila. Nila means abode. Abode for whom? Ah iti Brahma. So the Brahman's first abode is this Anila, who is called as Shuchi, and he is celebrated in the Keno Upanishad as Sahu Pranasya Pranaha. Yeah, this Saha is important, right? So we understood this last time. Saha there means he. Who is he? Sa Vishnurahahi, Devi Mimamsa. And of course, Akaya Prasavi Sambhuma Sakaha Vishnuvachakaha. As the Shastra says, Saha. Wherever Saha comes, think about Vishnu, because these are all the secret names of Narayana. So Narayana only, U means Eva. So Narayana only is Pranasya Pranaha. So Vishnu only is the Antaryamin inside the highest among the Jivas. So Savu Pranasya Pranaha. And then Chakshushash, Chakshuhu means inside. Okay. So yeah, so now maybe because we are doing such deep studies of this verse, and we always should compare with the sutras, right? Always bring sutra whenever we are doing Upanishad studies. And here is a beautiful, beautiful samanvaya. So shrotrasya shrotram manasa mano vachaha vacham chakshushash chakshuhu. Okay, you will find exactly the same verses in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So our Sutrakara, Krishna Dvaipayana, has actually composed the sutra, and I'm just giving it to you for reference here, called Pranadayo Vakya Seshat. So if you go to that sutra, then you will have a reference in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So what does that Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is? The same verse as Kena Upanishad. Pranasya prana uta chakshushash chakshuhu shrotrasya shrotram annasya annam manasa manoha. That is in the Madhyandina recension. Then there is a Kanva recension of this verse, which is pretty much the same as the Kena Upanishad. Pranasya prana uta chakshushash chakshur uta shrotasya shrotram manasa yena mano viduhu. Okay. So there, what Badarayana does is he settles these arguments as to why Anna is here, why Anna is not used in Kanva recension and so on, and asks about Vakya Sesha, see the remaining of the verse and so on. So you can go and do up these readings, but the sutra has addressed a verse in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which is very similar to Kena Upanishad. So as you know, sutra is Vishwato Mukha, right? Wherever there is application in one, if there is a similar place where you have to apply, you have to apply that Pranadayo Vakya Sesha also here and understand what is it that Badarayana is talking about this verse. They who know the breadth of the breadth, the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear, the foot of the foot, the mind of the mind, they have realized the ancient primordial Brahman, says Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Okay. That in which 5 groups of 5 people and space are established. I regard that alone as Atman Brahman. Knowing that immortal Brahman, one becomes immortal. Okay, so that is what this verse talks about. Okay. Why is all this? Because our Brahman is everywhere. When I say Shrotrasya Shrota Manasa Mano, the idea there is Brahman has created everything, and inside everything he is entered also. Tadeva anupravishat, tad anupravishya sat cha tyat cha abhavat. Okay, that he makes everything work by pervading in his creation. That is why Kena Upanishad again talks about Shrotrasya Shrotram and so on. Okay, so those are all a lot of philosophy that we can think about. Then of course the question is, what is the benefit of knowing this entity? It's all fine. Let's do it over the next 5-10 minutes and close at least this person. We have to make some progress, right? What is the benefit of knowing this entity? Okay, so it is all well and good talking about the regulator and so on, but what is the benefit of knowing this entity? So who wants to kind of think about this? What is the benefit of actually understanding that there is an Antaryamin inside me who is an independent controller of everything that I am doing? What will be the result of that? So once we understand this, then only the teachings of the Gita starts. Without understanding this fact, there is no point reading the Gita. We have to get this basics right. So then you take the manual called the Gita and then run your life so that you can reach that ultimate state of immortality that Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is talking about. So anybody wants to share their ideas about what is the benefit of knowing this independent entity who is a regulator of all? No problem.
Is it liberation, moksha?
So how will that lead to moksha, Anandji? Just because I know that there is an Antaryamin who is a regulator, why should it lead to moksha, for example?
It will lead to paroksha jnana, which will then lead to aparoksha jnana.
Okay, so that is true. And why should it lead to aparoksha jnana, Devalji? Just because knowing this independent entity who is inside? No problem. Okay, so I think about all the whole idea of karma yoga and everything comes from this. Okay, so karma yoga is the starting point, right? Without practicing the nishkama karma yoga, you can't do anything else. And that is the starting point for our spiritual journey. So if you think about it from that perspective, you will, the thing is that if you understand there is a regulator and there is an independent person who is a doer of everything, then that ownership of what you do goes away, and then you can start actually understanding what the nishkama karma yoga is all about. And the nishkama karma yoga, then that will happen only with jnana, and then that leads to bhakti. Then that leads to grace, right? It is that grace that eventually will lead to the destruction of all the karmic imprints that we have accumulated, and then that leads to what Devalji was mentioning about aparoksha jnana, and then you have the liberation. So to reach that liberation, you have to start somewhere, is to have a firm grounding of that I am a dependent being. Okay, there are some folks who think they themselves are Brahman. That is an entirely different problem. But we have to think that we are very dependent beings and that we are dependent on this Paramatma, and he is Sarvakarta, he is Sarva Shakti, he knows everything, and he will make things happen the way what we deserve is what we get, and so on and so forth. Then that philosophical journey, that spiritual journey goes. So that is exactly what the next half of this line is. Maybe in the next 8 minutes, we'll try and touch this. What is the advantage of somebody who understands Shrotrasya Shrotram, Manasa Mano, Yadvachaha Vacham, Savupranasya Pranaha, Chakshushu Chakshuhu? What is the benefits for the person? The person who knows all this is called the Dhiraha. Okay, we'll come to that word Dhiraha. The Dhiraha, what happens to him? Atimuchya Pretya Asmat Lokad Amruta Bhavati. That is the highest benefit to know this. So who is the Dhira? Dhiya Ramate iti Dhiraha. One who relishes in knowledge. He is Dhira. And what has that Dhira learned? That he has understood this fundamental truth. The one who understands this fundamental truth, the knowledgeable, then becomes brave, because there is this Antaryamin who is inside him, who is looking after everything. So why should I worry? Okay, so he becomes a brave person. Abhayam. He becomes very brave. So that is the Dhiraha. What happens to him? First is Pretya Asmat Lokad. Okay, this is an important word, very beautiful word. This is the beauty of our language. There's so many ideas packed in these words. Lokad. What is this loka? Loka means this material. It could be the material world. You are in this samsara, in this material world. But it also means your body. Loka. This body is the place in which you are reciting, right? So today we were reciting chapter 13, Kshetra Kshetrajna. This Kshetra is this body. Kshetrajna is the soul who has a limited understanding of this body, but Paramatma is the real Kshetrajna who knows about all bodies. Yeah, Kshetra, Loka, they are all very similar. So this Loka, this body, Pretya. So Pretya is very interesting. Preta, we say dead body, dead somebody who died, Preta, and all that. We use it in a very derogatory way, dare I say. But actually, Pretya in Vedas is a very significant word. What is Pretya? Pra plus Yeti. Yeti means climbs up, goes up. Prakrishcha Yeti. So the highest travel upwards. What is that highest travel upwards? Is the Archiradi Marga, isn't it? The path of the sun that we have learned. That is, you keep going high. Pretya. Pretya, that Archiradi, that follows the route of the sun, is the route for liberation. Okay, so this person who knows this eventually will give up not only this material world but also this gross material body, but he will make the most celebrated upward journey. Okay, so there is a verse, similar verse. I've got a quiz here. Yeyam prete vichikitsya manushye asti iti eke na ayam asti iti cha eke eted vidyam anushishta tvaya aham varanamesha varaha tritiyaha. Who asked this question to whom, in which Upanishad? He is Yeyam prete. So who wants to take that one? Which Upanishad is that? Quick quiz.
Prashna Upanishad.
Prashna, okay, we'll park it there. Varas Tritiyaha is the clue there, Anandji. So Katha Upanishad. Yeah. So in Katha Upanishad, our Nachiketa asked this question, Yeyam prete vichikitsa. The prete is very important. Our Acharya has given us a clear direction. What that prete means in that question. Prete means the direction towards liberation. The question that Katha in Nachiketa is asking there is not whether the souls exist after death. That's a stupid question for him to ask. The question he is asking is, in liberation, what is the state? Or jivas have their own identity? Do jivas don't have their identity when they've done prete? So try and understand. I mean, my idea here, intention is to understand what pretya actually means is prakrishta eti. That is the path of the liberation. So pretya asmad lokat, and then not only that, and Chaturmukha has put atimuchya. Okay, Atimuchya is interesting. One view of Atimuchya is getting rid of samsara, ignorance, bonds of karma, getting rid of linga sharira is the primary meaning there. Ati Muchya means you can get rid of the gross bodies, but ultimately we have to get rid of the Linga Sharira that plagues us from eternity, right? Until we get rid of the Linga Sharira, there is no liberation. So, not only Pretya Asmad Lokat, you lose this gross body and make this journey upwards. But eventually, of course, we will all have to go to Chaturmukha's abode and hang out with him in Satyaloka. Then Ati Muchya give up the Ligga Sharira, and then Amruta Bhavanti. That is when you reach the liberation, when you understand this philosophy of the Vedas, that we are different from Paramatma. We are eternally dependent on the Paramatma. He is the independent regulator of everything. That knowledge leads to devotion. The devotion moves, gives him the grace, and then he is able to give us the aparoksha jnana and the liberation. Amruta bhavanti. Amruta there means what? Mruta means death. The only solution is Amruta is you will never be born again and you will never die again. Why is that? Because you don't carry any linga sharira, no material embodiments, and you get liberated. That is the very last sutra of Veda Vyasa in Brahma Sutra. Anavrittihi Shabdat. Anavrittihi Shabdat. The Vedas. Shabda means Veda. Avruti means repetition. Repeat. Repeat means repetitions of birth and rebirth. Anavritti means you never have that cycle of birth and death. Says what? Shabdat. Which Shabdat? Everywhere in the Vedas, including this Keno Upanishad, Amruta Bhavati. And in Chandogya Upanishad, there is another beautiful, beautiful verse that also finishes like this. Nacha punara vartate, nacha punara vartate. That is the same meaning as anavrittihi shabdat, anavrittihi shabdat. Okay. Shrotrasya shrotram, manasa mano, yadvachaha vacham, savupranasya pranaha, chakshushash chakshuhu, atimuchya, dhiraha, Pretya asmad lokad amruta bhavati. So this second line, of course, is the summary of the whole Vedantic philosophy. If we can keep on reciting and reminding us again and again, probably this verse alone is enough for our onward spiritual journey. Okay, it's a very important verse of the second mantra of the Keno Upanishad, of the first Adhyaya, and hopefully we made some little justice from all that we have learned from our gurus and the various tippanis, and of course from Srimad Acharya, who has given us the right perspective. We have to understand this. We are different. We are regulated by a Paramatma. If we understand that, then there is a scope for us. Okay, so of course we have discussed how can realizing that there is a supreme being controller leads everything to liberation, because this concept of cosmic antaryamin becomes very, very, very important, right? Discussed in the Antaryami Brahmanam of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And again, you look at this. What are all the words? Yo Agnihi Tishtan, Yo Vayo Tishtan, Yo Chakshushu Tishtan, Yo Pranaya Tishtan, Yo Vachi Tishtan. Yeah, they're all the same. Yeah, yes, chakshushi tishtan. The ideas that the Keno Upanishad is talking about is exactly what our cosmic Antaryamin that is described in the Antaryami Brahmana Brihadaranyaka Upanishad also talks about Yashrotre Tishtan, Yo Manasi Tishtan. So once we understand that it is not the material things, it is the Abhimani Devatas that are being described here, and then that there is an Antaryamin inside them. Think about that, think about that. Okay, when we do that, then there is a solution. So of course our Rudra is at this point he's very, 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 very elated, and he says, oh, this is beautiful, this is a fantastic concept that you've described through me to all the mundane jivas who are there in this satsang. Fantastic. Kavu Devo Yunakti is the question that he asked in the very first. Kavu, this Deva, this Antaryaman, Yunakti, how does he regulate? Tell me more about it. We just say he is regulating. What does that regulation mean? Okay. Explain to me fully the greatness of the controller of senses and mind. And what is his greatness? How does he control? What is his standard operating procedure? What is his SOP? How does he do this controllership? How does it work? How can I understand the independent regulatorship of the Lord? is the next idea, that the next level of, I think the next verse is the highest forms of philosophy that you can actually get in Vedic philosophy. Then Chaturmukha answers this question saying, Natatra chakshur gacchati, navag gacchati, no manaha, na vidma, na vijanimo yade tad anushishyat. Anushishya means regulatorship. Chaturmukha is saying, I don't know. Okay. He's spoken so much about the Shrotrasya Shrotram, Shotrasya Shrotam Manasa Mano. When Rudra asking, explain to me in detail about his regulatorship. Chaturmukha, the highest among the souls, the most knowledgeable, says, I don't know. Na tatra chakshur gacchati, na vag gacchati, no manaha. None of these guys know. Even you, Rudra, you don't know. Not the Agni does not know. The Chandra does not know. Rudra does not know. Even me, na vidmaha. Na vijanimo yadyetadanushishyaat. Okay. So that goes into the deeper concepts of knowability and unknowability of Brahman. Can God be known? Or he will always remain unknown to us, or is he knowable? Okay. Those are the next set of verses that Chaturmukha actually talks about. This very distant unknown entity. Is he knowable or not? Okay, again, that is in a different chandas. It is in an Anushtup chandas, third mantra, which is the most common chandas in the scriptures, as you know. But it starts now talking about, can I know Paramatma or not? What is the answer to that? So to get that contemplation going, join us next Sunday for the next session, which will start looking at the third mantra. So on that note, Krishna Pranamastu. If anybody has any questions, we'll take it up. Deval.
Slightly confusing. So if you compare it with Christianity, where there is a concept of free will, how much dependence do we have
You mean
on God?
independence? Sorry, you mean independence?
Ha- no, but we. So if you want to know God, the motivation also, the volition also comes from God. So whatever you do is also from God. So then how does that explain? If you have total dependence, then what is it that you are doing?
Yeah, interesting. Anybody wants to take up this question? Anybody
We
wants
have
to?
it. We have Ichha Shakti. We have Ichha Shakti. So we have a free will, but again, that free will is dependent upon the God. But definitely, we have a free will.
Yeah, anybody else? Thanks, Anandji. Anybody else has a view? So I think Devalji, it's an important question. I mean, of course, I don't want to go into other religious views. Once you put the idea of free will, and if you think that the free will is an independent free will, first of all, the free will itself is a bit problematic in Vedantic philosophy, in Vedic philosophy. Yeah. So if you have a will, I would just say a will, a dependent will. Okay, and that dependent will actually comes from your jiva swabhava. It is your jiva swabhava that dictates that will, which is dependent, and Paramatma allows you to play out your dependent will, and then that leads to karma and your purushakya prayatna. So it all boils down to the jiva kartrutva. That is where the philosophy, the crux of it is. So there is actually, in Vedic philosophy, there is actually nothing called the free will. People who think that the souls have free will, they just have to look at the Mundaka Upanishad. Anishaya shochati mukhyamanaha jushtam yada pashyati anyamisham. Anishaya shochati. It just cannot do anything. If it is free will, it must be capable of charting its destiny perfectly well, but it doesn't. So that itself is the answer to show that there is no free will. There is a will, but that will operates under the direction of Paramatma. Because the Paramatma, if you say that the souls have free will, that they can independently make their choice, then instantly you are taken up that you have removed that independence from Paramatma, and you have actually accused him of not having independence. Okay, there is that. You have to be very careful about that concept of independence of Paramatma is absolute. Paramatma's independence is absolute. There is no, partial independence for the souls. Jivas are totally dependent is the constitutional position. Our problem of getting entangled in samsara and going round and round in circles emanates from this ignorance that we somehow have free will. So it is that the Vedas constantly tell us, remove that. You are a very dependent being. Okay. that is
Okay.
how it operates. I hope that answers your question, but feel free to put back your thoughts on this.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. So if you have no further questions, may I request Suresh ji to recite Om and we close today's session, please.
Om.
Thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe. So we'll catch up with the next session next Sunday, and following which, hopefully, we'll have our Gita Chintana on the 1st of June. Okay, so we'll keep you posted on that. Hare Krishna, and we'll catch up next week.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.